My name is Joe Letterman. I'm one of the counselors at Woodbridge High School. A little background about myself. 12 years ago on Valentine's Day, I moved down here. I started working here at Hilton High School. Worked here for 7 years and then went on to be the director at Woodbridge Middle School. This is my first year back at the high school level because high school kids are just so much more fun. I am from Buffalo, New York, so I can honestly say I did walk to school 2 miles in the snow uphill. So there's my bona fides right there, and I love our snow days from Prince William County. I always, Dr. Waltz is here, I'll have to ask him for my standard 10 to 12, because I'm greedy. Today we're going to talk about the SAT versus ACT. Luckily, your students go to Prince William County schools, so I believe they are in a good place to be ready for each of these tests, no matter what test they choose to take. We're going to go through the presentation. There are 3 video clips. They have decided not to play today, but they will be available online at pwcs.edu in a folder for the summit, and so all the material you'll have today from any session will be available online later. Okay? So, and if we have a question or two, I'll sprinkle them in since the videos are not going to work. We'll kind of schedule, we'll have some questions as they come along. Okay? Awesome. Here we go. All right. Learn about the importance of standardized testing in college admissions, learning differences and similarities between the SAT and ACT. Learn about the top test optional movement, and learn about test preparation for students. Let me start off with saying this. No test will ever replace the 3.5 to 4 years your students spend in school. These tests can be retaken, and ladies and gentlemen, these tests are just as stressful to these students as they were when the 16 and 17-year-old of ourselves took these tests back in the day as well. It is a very stressful time for them. Luckily, the county provides some possibilities for getting themselves used to it. Sophomores and juniors get the PSAT free of charge. And by being free of charge, your tax dollars pay for it. During your sophomore and junior year, October. That is about getting them used to the test environment. The content's being taught every day in the classroom. That is happening. But when you are sitting down in an environment, in a very sterile, stabilized, standard environment, it's something the students are not used to, and it really, I think those 2 opportunities really kind of help them. Everyone says, well, they take SOLs, that should prepare them for it. The SAT and ACT, as you guys probably well remember, are different kinds of animals. And the stress on their faces that morning are always fun to watch, and yet I feel kind of bad for them because, again, it is miserable. I always encourage them, like, Mr. Letterman, what should I bring to the test? Your calculator, your admission ticket, and your pajamas. Be comfortable, because these are tests that, they take time, and they are draining, I would say. So, but if you can be comfortable in the test environment, you're doing yourself a favor. Okay? So here we go. College preparatory courses, strength of curriculum, overall high school GPA, and admission scores. Again, that goes back to the, what your student takes during the day matters. I have a student, I just had a conference with a student where the mom, student desperately wants to go to Johns Hopkins. That's her school. That's what she wants to go to robotics. And the mom said to me, well, all she needs is a good GPA in these classes. No. If you're going to go to Johns Hopkins for robotics, the strength of curriculum that that she's going to take really kind of matters. These test scores, matter. So again, I'll mention this a few times throughout the presentation, when's the appropriate time to take these tests? I usually say spring of your junior year, okay? That's usually the average high school student will be in Algebra 2 at that time. So that's probably the most appropriate time. If your student struggles in math and hopefully they have not gotten behind and maybe they're taking geometry their junior year and hopefully that has not happened, they might be at a disadvantage when it comes to these tests. And again, there'll be a table that kind of breaks it down. But what your student takes in the classroom matters. We always try to encourage the students to take at least 1 or 2 pre-AP classes to challenge themselves, to build up the rigor of their curriculum, but make it also proportionally to what their abilities are and what their time management skills are. These colleges still do look at GPAs, they still look at these test scores. Okay. Later in the slide we'll talk about test optional. There is a movement to find alternatives to these tests, which is nice, but again, these tests are still a part of the college application process. Okay. Let's take a different look inside. Okay. Basic structure, what's contained on the SAT and the ACT. Okay. If you notice, there's one thing that the SAT does not have, the science section. There's one great question I had at one of the previous sessions is like, well, if you're good at science, are you more likely to take the ACT? Professionally, I would say yes. Because if that's something you're really good at, why wouldn't you take a test that's kind of more in your wheelhouse where you're going to get more points toward that section? Okay, I'm not calling them free points because you got to answer the questions right, but something you're more kind of accustomed to or more acclimated to. That's something that kind of is in your wheelhouse. Both tests have optional essays. Okay, and then we'll get into scoring a little bit later too. But the SAT has kind of gone back and forth about this. And when you and I were probably in school, it was straight 1600. Remember, you had your math and you had your verbal. Well, now it's critical reading and not verbal. And I believe it's right around the time I started working in Prince William County Schools, they added the essay and they added an extra 800 points onto the test. That has now gone away. They're back to scoring at between 1600 and they get a supplemental score for the essay. To a man, the essay was a secondary source of information for the colleges. Not that they were totally discounting it, but they were definitely pulling primarily from the reading and the math scores still. Adding in the essay. Okay, the ACT is, as long as I can remember, has always had the optional essay. It is not hurting that. No school has ever come to me and said, have them take the essay or else. They've never been told that to me professionally, saying one is better than the other one. I remember growing up in New York, I had never heard of the ACT at all because at the time really it was kind of a West Coast, Midwest kind of test, and over the years it has kind of migrated this way to where they are equal. There's no school that I have come across professionally that said, yeah, they can't take this ACT. That's not going to count for them. UVA is going to take the ACT. Mary Washington's going to take the ACT. Virginia Tech's going to take the ACT. There is the SAT subject test. We'll get into that a little bit later as well. It kind of deviates from where they go. But this is basically the SAT 1 versus the ACT kind of side by side. Okay, standard time, about equal. Your students. How many juniors and sophomores do we have in here? We got here juniors and sophomores. You're signing up for about a 3-hour test. Okay, we're talking between breaks and instructions and all that stuff like that. We're talking about 8 to 1, 8 to 12:30 kind of time range. So although it may be only a 3.5 hour test, by the time you do all the extra stuff, you are extending the test that much longer. Okay, so it is bring a stamina situation. Passages, ACT 5, ACT 4, science, SAT none, critical thinking and skills. Again, that's this basic structure. SAT covers this material. Okay. The one thing I can't stress enough, bring the calculator. Okay? On the SAT, there's one section where you are not allowed to use the calculator. The fear in the students' eyes when they can't use a calculator is palpable. It is like, what? Like, at least give me an abacus, you know? At least bring me an abacus or something like that. I'm used to like typing numbers. The test center cannot provide a calculator. The students always come to me and say, Mr. Letterman, I don't have a calculator. Call mommy and daddy. Get them up here as fast as possible. And they live in Stafford. Uh-oh. The tests say you can do all the math in your head. Let's use technology. Let's use the tools available to us. Yes, sir.
Graphing calculator or just standard?
Graphing calculator, yes. There is a list, like the TI-83s, there's a list of permissible calculators that has expanded throughout the years. But no, you can go something beyond the 4-function calculator. I had a student last time I gave the test use a 4-function calculator. I don't know how he or she did, honestly, but I bet it was interesting. So, but again, they say you can do all the math in your head. I prefer the calculator. That's just me. The ACT allows you to use a calculator in the whole test. Okay. Okay. What I will say, actually, going back to that thing is, I guess it goes into test appropriateness. The average Prince William County student, and this is just basic averages, I know students go on different tracks and whatnot, the average student is going to take algebra their freshman year, geometry their sophomore year, algebra 2 their junior year. The end of algebra 2 is when they usually get into kind of like trigonometry and material like that. That's the appropriate time to take these tests. Can you take these tests anytime? Yes, you may. No one's going to stop you from taking these tests. What I'm saying is you're going to probably be at a mathematical disadvantage if you are kind of not waiting to that time. We just got the PSATs back. Students, did you give back your parents your PSAT scores? Did you get them back? Okay. Because last group, some people didn't have their PSAT scores, and they're there.
Well, they have to go online to get them.
They're available. Some parents were unaware they were available. I was like, no, they're available. We have paper copies. Like us at Woodbridge, we're going to hand them out come scheduling time. But most of the students have seen them online.
Will they, counselors, will they hand them out?
At Woodbridge, I don't know what everyone else is doing, but at Woodbridge, we're going to give them out during scheduling when we meet with our students. Yeah, so they are available. My sophomores and juniors are always bent because I could have done better. What happened? I'm like, well, when you took that test, you had geometry, right? Like, yeah. Well, the PSAT does not gauge whether you're a sophomore or a junior. It doesn't care. It's the same material. When you're a junior taking that test, you've been in algebra for about a month. You do not have the math. By and large, you look at those scores. The reading score is going to be higher than the math score, I would say a significant amount of time. Well, now if you gave them the test, if you gave them a practice test today, they'd probably do much better on the math because they've had several months of the concepts involved. Yes, ma'am.
So when a kid is, basically a year or 2 years ahead in math, they're at a disadvantage when it comes to taking these tests.
Advantage?
Disadvantage, because they've now forgotten it. It's been so long ago.
Well, if you're say if you're a junior and you're taking pre-calc, say you're in analytical geometry, no, those concepts should still be there. I mean, geometry, that pre-calc is covering all those concepts, so that they should be. That's an advantage because you've had the math before. I mean, it's.
So long, and my son even more so 2 years ahead.
He's but.
He's an 8th grader, but should I hold him back now?
No, you don't. I would never stunt the mathematical progress of that. But again, these are tests. If he can get to calc, I had one student. He got to calc by sophomore year. She got to AB calc sophomore year. Did BC calc junior year. I ran out of math classes to take her. I think we sent her over to Nova. But no, I would never slow them down because that goes back to look at the curriculum. The college are going to see the curriculum like, wow, you did this. Yeah, I would never stunt them like that.
See, hopefully they'll overlook possible and see what you've accomplished.
I've never had the experience, honestly, where the kid didn't score on par with what their math is, honestly. So I can't say that comes from a knowledge where they've forgotten a lot of the concepts. So I think usually they score pretty well. So.
What are the highest scores on the PSAT?
I'm sorry, what?
The highest scores.
They're scoring out of 1,600.
Okay, so it's an 800.
800, yeah. So, to hear about the essays again, they're optional. Both are optional. As juniors, a couple years ago, they had a graduation requirement where you had to write a 5 to 7 page paper to graduate, and that paper takes like all quarter to write. You have 50 minutes to write this paper. So it's kind of counterintuitive to what we've been taught, sloppy copies and bubble charts and that kind of thing. So I mean, the test, the essay itself is not research based. It's not like we can give you a thesaurus or Wikipedia to resource it. It is a kind of a nebulous question that's easily to write down. But I think that's why the colleges really kind of realized, or the College Board kind of realized, it's counterintuitive to what we've been teaching them. So they kind of backed off the scoring it on par with the writing and math scores. How it scored again: Ford 1,600, 136. Super scoring. Okay, now's a good time to talk about super scoring. Okay, super scoring is this: when Mr. Letterman took the PSAT, he got 1020. On the SAT, he got the same score. He got 1030 both times. I don't know who does that, but I pulled it off. Got 1030 both times I took the test. What the colleges did was they took my math from my first test, they took the verbal from my second test, and put them together for one score of 1070. Okay, I understand from a previous question is there was one session that advised against taking an abundance of courses. I would agree upon that. In taking these tests 4 and 5 times, I think you see where you are, if you are probably scoring within a window, you very rarely see a dramatic shift between the two. I had my one student this year, I believe he is Carnegie Mellon bound. He looked at me with a straight face. He goes, Mr. Lerman, I got 1560 on the SAT. Should I take it again? I'm like, well, I mean, if you want to, but I think you're good. He got perfect on the math test. He scored perfect on the SAT. Yeah. Yeah. I was like, dude, if you want to go, I mean, if that's the way you have fun on Saturday, be my guest. But I think you're good. I think if you knock out of the park the first time, that's great. My brother was the same way. He graduated third to last in his class. Didn't know he was going to graduate. He walked in the SAT, no calculator, 1 pencil, scored 1350. I'm like, man, he was the one who was not college bound. I was getting out, my mom and him were getting letters from Cornell and NYU and stuff like that. I'm like, these guys have not seen my brother's GPA. Well, when they saw it, that mail stopped real fast, didn't it? I'm like, can that be passed down to your younger brother? Can help a brother out? And so but that goes back to, okay, you did really well on a test, kid, but your time management stinks and your grades stink for whatever reason. Now, again, not because my brother was dumb. He was obviously quite smart. He just wasn't I'm going to sit at your desk and do your work kind of thing. He could have been, if he would have had just a decent GPA with those test scores, he could have wrote his own meal ticket. And I'm pretty confident my student's going to get into Carnegie Mellon and kind of do his thing. He has mail coming over from wherever, and I asked him, well, should I do this application? I'm like, do you want to go to Nebraska? He's like, no, chuck it. Because this is a national test, and he's just your student's going to get mail from, all around the world, pretty much. University of Hawaii Pacific, that was my favorite piece of mail. Gallon of milk is like $7. What's the best for your child? This is I apologize for the small. Again, this will be available online later so you can get kind of acquainted with it. Are you a fast reader versus are you like the classics? Are you good at doing math by hand? Again, that comes right down to the section where you are doing the math in your head compared to no calculator. Are you good at mental math? The science portion is here on the ACT, no on the ACT. English writing, reading information from graphics and graphs. Are you good at analyzing texts and arguments? The one thing that came up at the other section, 2 sessions, the SAT 2, okay? And they said, if you're a good science student, could you take the SAT 2 for the science? Yes, there are the SAT 2 subject tests. Some of the upper level colleges, such as, I'll say UVA for Virginia being the gold standard for UVA, just for argument's sake. The UVA might say, we want you to take the SAT subject test. The subject test are specific in English, math, science. I believe there's a foreign language one. I do not remember how many tests you can take at one time. The SAT 1 and SAT 2 are separate tests. So when on testing day, you have a room of SAT 2 testers, you have a room of SAT 1 testers. You cannot take them at the same time. They are separate experiences. You can take one test if you choose, the SAT subject test. Every test is an hour long. You can choose to take one test, or there's a max out point. I can't quite remember if it's 3 or 4, to be honest with you. I want to say it's 3, but I'm not quite sure about that. That's available online as well. But you choose what tests you take, basically. Okay, but again, that's a separate experience that's scored on a different scale as well. Okay, timing. I would say this. My wife is a 7th grade language arts teacher at Woodbridge Middle School. And the biggest thing she runs into on the SOL level is reading stamina. How long can these kids get together and read these passages and pull information out from those passages and answer these questions? The SAT has this, the initial shock of 65 minutes. Okay, as you notice, the ACT kind of has a little more sustained cutout of it, a little more consistent. All right, guys, we're going to sit down for this test. Sit for the first hour and 5 minutes. That's hard. That's hard for kids these days. Okay? A little smaller section, and then our math is 55 minutes. That's hard. the twisting and moving and cracking and stomping and clicking, and that's when it all starts, okay? So stamina is really kind of, if your student knows himself to maybe be a little more, I need to break it up a little bit. I mean, you do have 60 minutes like right here, but by this time you're kind of into it. But depending on what kind of student you are, maybe the pacing of the test might be a contributing factor to kind of where you are. Okay? Here's the big question right here, how's it scored? Incorrect answers, no point deduction for both. Correct answers, 1 point. Omitted, which means you don't answer the question. If you leave it blank, no point deduction. This has changed throughout the years. They've kind of gone back and forth. Is it better to answer C for anything, or is it better to just leave it blank? Currently, there's no point deduction, no point deduction. They're scoring you based off what you have answered. Yes, sir?
Is there a cost for the SAT2 or subject test?
There are costs, yes. Every test costs X amount of dollars. Okay? And that's why, guys, again, you look at your students in terms of, I'm taking these tests. I think the tests are at least $50. I mean, and no offense, it's probably your money that they're spending. So again, I have never been a proponent of taking, if you can, I always say this, if you can take an SAT and ACT and ask the student, which one did you like more? Which one did you feel more comfortable more? You take that one again. If you haven't already knocked it out of the park. If you already knocked it out of the park, we're good. Okay? I think we get into, like, when you look at colleges, you look at averages. No number should disqualify. You see these averages for Virginia Tech. Well, Virginia Tech's average SAT scores is 1240, and I only have an 1150. I can't get into college. They're averages. They are simply averages. There's no, I would say, sort of, I scored 400, I need like a 1200, okay, yeah, then we start getting into silly season. But again, as long as you are close, and I define close as 100 to 200 points as close, I think you're still falling within that range. Yes, sir?
For the scoring for the ACT, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but after you take it a certain amount of times, you no longer improve the one score, it becomes an average?
They have said that in the past, where they will stop super scoring at some point. The college will just say, okay, you've taken this test 3 or 4 times, we're just going to take this average. That's why, again, I encourage them to kind of, take a big picture look at it in terms of, again, you can't stop the kids from signing up. We can only recommend, like, no, why don't you take this test twice and super score it. If they are determined to take these tests, you can't stop them. But yeah, I think at some point you get a minimum return on the scoring. It just gets into, I mean, think about your junior year. You have the reading and writing SOL, you have your math and science SOL, have a history SOL, and you're going to throw an SAT on top, an SAT and ACT on there. It's a lot of tests. So I think, again, your student needs to kind of, schedule it out. Yes, ma'am?
I'm not clear on super scoring. What is that?
Okay, so super scoring, okay, is no good way of saying it. Regardless of what test you take, these are your scores, okay? These are the tests that you have taken. They're in a bank, okay? So the colleges are choosing to basically take the better score out of all 4 scores, okay? So you have again, when you and I were younger, it was verbal and math. Now it's critical reading and math. So if you have a set of scores, you have two readings and 2 math scores, and you score better one the first test and better one the second test, the colleges are going to take the better score of the pair. Across all the time take. Correct. No. If you don't take, they won't take the better score of the second test. If they need to go to the first test to get the better score, they will do that. Yeah, they'll do that.
But that's just for the SAT, you're talking about 2 different scorings.
Correct.
ACT is just one score.
For the composite. Yeah, the composite score, but the ACT also they can also see, because before what would happen is I would get a copy of the scores, I would make a photocopy, send it with the transcripts. Well, now the students have to send it directly from the testing service, so the colleges can see the individual breakdown of each section, so they can say, pulling this one, pulling that one, to make a new composite score. Yes, ma'am?
How often are the tests offered to take? Like if they take it in the spring of their junior year, when can they take it again?
Okay, great question. Amazing question. Okay? Depending on when depending on when your student is looking to apply to college, okay, A lot of students I have, they come back in the fall and they have, I want to go to JMU. I'm going to do the November 1st early action, early admission deadline. The first test is given the first Saturday of October for the SAT. Okay, the ACT is usually like a week below it. They need to take that test in order to, either if you don't take it in the spring of your junior year, that test in the first test in the fall is going to be the test they need to take in order to have a score available for that deadline. I believe the scores actually came back in about 5 weeks this year. They came back pretty fast. Before, you were waiting for it because it is a paper test. It's not done online. There was a good question. The next question was, is it done online now? No, this is still a paper test. They're still boxing these things up, sending them back to New Jersey or wherever to get scored. So they came back relatively pretty fast this year. So that way, by the time they apply November 1st for their early action deadlines, they're going to be not that far behind for there. Now, if you're deciding not to do early action and you're not kind of bound by that November 1st deadline, could you draw it out a little bit? Yes, but I usually say let's get a good score by end of junior year, beginning of senior year, and kind of see where we're.
Testing over the summer?
They do not do testing over the summer. They do not. It's surprising, but they do not. And then remember, this is a national test. Everyone tests on the same day. So that first Saturday in October, nationally they are giving that test. So that way no one can input scores.
Is there already a date for the spring?
Oh yeah, those dates are published already. You can go on. You go and
Lots of dates.
yeah, there's a ton of dates. And I know Woodbridge has a March SAT date combined with ACT dates. So yeah, they're sprinkled among. It just depends on what testing center you want to test at. Obviously, you want to try and be at your school because you have home field advantage. But it's not like if you're a Battlefield kid and you can take a test at Patriot, that's not much of a drive. I'd like to avoid the Patriot to Woodbridge drive, Saturday morning, because they start. We're off at 8 o'clock check-in. So if you're driving from Haymarket to Woodbridge, that's not a fun drive. So yes, ma'am. Okay. So, but yeah, there are multiple test dates available. There are multiple test centers available. So that's not a. Prince William County does a great job of providing those opportunities to the students. It just depends on how far are we driving for the experience. Yes. Correct. Yes, it is. It is a web-based. Either it's accststudent.org or College Board. I believe it's collegeboard.org too. The College Board is actually a good profile to have because it does a lot of the search engines and scholarship offers. It is more than just a college test site. It is actually a good backup. Every student in Prince William County has Naviance where you can do college searches, scholarship searches, a lot of things like that. The College Board is an excellent resource for that other material. So you could definitely go home today, get an account, and have access to those materials and not sign up for a test. So, yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, the College Board also offers where you input your PSAT score that your child gets, and Khan Academy is linked to College Board, and it will set up, it'll look at your child's breakdown of the score and set up individualized practice sessions for your child to improve for the SAT or ACT for those parents who don't know.
She's about 7 slides ahead of me. so she's done this before, so that's good. Okay, and these videos are about 3 to 5 minutes long.
Hey guys, it's Kristen here from Magoosh, and on this episode of Tuesday CT, we are working on a little series comparing these sections of the ACT to the sections of the new SAT. So if you're not sure which test is right for you, well, hopefully we can help you out. And today we're talking about how the ACT English section compares to the SAT writing section. They're basically the same thing, they just have different names. And now, with the new SAT, you'll find that they are the most alike. In fact, they look almost identical in terms of structure. So the ACT has always given students questions and context. So it's like a draft that you're editing, you're fixing grammar mistakes, you're switching out an idea for a more specific idea, things like that as you go through a passage. The SAT used to have isolated questions, but now they're all within the context of a passage, just like the ACT. So you'll find if you're prepping for both the ACT and the SAT that the sections, the English section, the ACT English section, and the SAT writing section actually look really, really similar now. they both now test both grammar errors and rhetorical skills. So the ACT always tested both of these topics, so a lot of grammar questions, but then also a lot of questions on ideas and organizations and development. And the SAT used to have a few questions like that, which falls into this rhetorical skills category, but now they have a lot more. So the ACT and the new SAT have gotten even more similar in that respect too. So as far as passage difficulty goes, well, what you're going to find is on the ACT, the English passages are pretty easy, maybe about a 9th grade reading level. They're not incredibly complex. The SAT likes to switch up and vary the difficulty of their passages. So you're going to find on the English section that some passages are pretty easy and straightforward, and other ones are going to be from a text that's a bit more complex, which is going to make finding the grammar errors and fixing the rhetorical errors a little bit harder. But you'll also find some passages may be easier than the ones you normally see on the ACT. Now, the SAT, the new SAT, includes questions on a lot of its sections on informational graphics, or actually on all of its sections, really. So on the reading section, you're going to find some graphs integrated in the reading passage, and you're going to find that on the SAT writing section as well, too. So in a passage or in a question, you may see a data table, a chart, a graph of some sort. You're not going to find any of that on the ACT. On the ACT, it's all about just the text, just the writing. But a question on the SAT might ask you, for example, to find or fix a discrepancy between statistical data that's in the table and what's in the passage, or to switch a description in the passage to something more specific based on the data that's in that table, for example. So you're going to have to be working a little bit with informational graphics on the SAT English section as well, actually the SAT writing section, ACT's English. And then finally, time per question. So on the ACT, you have 75 questions. It's a lot of questions to do in 45 minutes. On the SAT, you have 44 questions to do in 35 minutes. So as is pretty typical with the ACT, it means you need to be working at a bit of a quicker pace. On the ACT, you're going to have about 36 seconds for each question, which I know doesn't sound like a lot. The SAT is a little bit more generous. You have 48 seconds per question, and you also have fewer questions to do on their respective section. So that is a little bit about how the ACT English and SAT writing sections compare. You can check out our other videos comparing the other sections if you're interested in that. And if you want to see some practice questions on both the ACT and the new SAT, you can go to www.magoosh.com. We have practice questions and lessons for both of those tests. And I will see you next Tuesday ACT for some more top ACT tips.
English sections, both are sections, grammar and rhetorical skills. Difficulty are pretty easy on the 9th grade level. SAT, you'll see more variation of difficulty. Someone asked me the other session, which test is easier? I don't think that's really the right way to say it. They're both rigorous. You're both going to take the skills that you've learned at a high school level appropriate curriculum and be challenged by it. So to say which test is easier, I don't think is a good way of kind of defining it, to be honest with you. So, and that's the same thing for the math section as well. I mean, they're both pretty rigorous, just kind of depending on which way you want to go. Again, number of questions limit. ACT has 75 questions, 45 minutes. That averages out to be about 36 seconds a question. And SAT is about 48 seconds per question. So I guess that 13 seconds does kind of matter. You know, it's I would say significant. So they start twisting and turning in their seats is at that time, really.
Hey everybody, welcome to Tuesday ACT. We're in the middle of a little series on how the ACT sections compare to the new SAT section. So if you're struggling to figure out which test is better for you, hopefully these videos are going to help you. And today we are talking about how the ACT math compares to the new SAT math section. So let's take a look at some of the similarities and differences between these two tests. So first of all, regarding a calculator, one of the big things about the new SAT is that it has a no calculator section, and that is going to be 20 questions and 25 minutes that you have to go through with no calculator. Now, for the most part, those questions well, you don't need a calculator for, but it doesn't mean you're not doing calculations. So if you're somebody who's not comfortable doing some basic math or really with doing a lot of manipulating of equations, so for example, maybe you'll have an equation and you need to figure out what the slope is, but you can't use your graphing calculator, or a function that you need to evaluate, or things like that. If you're not quite that comfortable without having your calculator in hands, that's something to be aware of. On the ACT, free range for calculator on the entire math section. Now let's talk about grid-ins and multiple choice questions. So on the ACT, all the questions are multiple choice, so you have answer choices for all of them. On the SAT, and this is true for the old SAT and the new SAT as well too, you're going to have some questions that you are just going to be gridding in or putting in your own answer for. So there's 80% multiple choice questions on the new SAT, and 20% of the questions you are not going to have the help of answer choices. You're going to need to input your own answer on the new SAT. Now the content is interesting because it used to be a big difference between the ACT and the SAT. The ACT covered some more advanced topics like trig, like matrices, like complex numbers, and now the new SAT is going to be covering some of those concepts as well too. It's all at a pretty basic level, but it's important to know that you're going to need to either brush up on some of these Algebra 2/trig concepts, or perhaps learn a few basics so that you can pick up those questions if that's part of your game plan for the math. And finally, let's take a look at how much time you have per question and how many questions there are. So on the ACT, you have 60 questions that you need to answer in 60 minutes. So talk about math. It's some pretty easy math. That gives you 1 minute per question. On the ACT, SAT and math's not so easy. You have 58 questions. Why they didn't pick a nice round number, I'm not sure. But you have 80 minutes to do them. So you have a lot more time. You actually have, there's a little bit of a difference. You have a little bit more time to answer the ones that you can use a calculator on versus the no calculator. But it averages out to about 1 minute and 22 seconds per question. So you might not be quite as pressed for time on the SAT, although that time's there to give you some time to really think through some more complex questions that the SAT likes to throw at you. But a lot of students, I think, will continue to feel that they're not quite as pressed for time on SAT math as they are on ACT math, in which you have to do the questions very quickly. So those are some basics on how the two tests compare. If you're still not sure which test is right for you, or you just want to practice both of them, you can go to magoosh.com. We have practice questions and lessons for both the ACT and the new SAT for you to check out. Do some good test prep.
Calculator usage. ACT all calculator. SAT has a portion of 20 questions. They have grid questions, so i.e. they're doing the problem, they have to grid the question, they have to grid the answer. It's not, the ACT is all multiple choice. The SAT has like grids where you have to kind of fill in the numbers at the top and kind of grid at the bottom. So there's you got to work more through your problems. Again, the ACT 60 questions, one per minute per question, 58 questions, no calculator. I'll go back to it, is they say you can use these, you can take these tests without a calculator. I would ask the students to please remember their calculator. That's important. The fear is real. when you forget a calculator, the fear is legitimately real. And I would ask to make sure you have it sitting there on the kitchen table with your ID and your ticket and your calculator and your pencils right there at the top, so you just kind of grab it all. Because it is, although you can do the test without them, I would not advise it. Yes, sir. Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's also good too for calculators like the TI-83 or 84 to program them in advance with the allowable programs, so you're saving a lot of time.
And there is a checklist too. There's a list on the website in terms of what calculators are permissible. That list is actually quite extensive these days. You can bring a four-function calculator and they say you can do it, but there is a list of acceptable calculators that has to be checked in when the testing starts.
So today we're talking about ACT reading, so let's go ahead and take a look at how these sections compare in terms of the number of passages and what type of content you're going to see, first of all. So on the ACT, you're going to see 4 reading passages total, and on the new SAT, you're going to see 5. One on each test is going to be a fiction passage, so the vast majority on both tests is nonfiction. Now, on the ACT, the passages you're going to see are slightly longer than the SAT, but not by much. On the SAT, they're about 500 to 750 words in length, and on the ACT, about 700 to 850 words. So you'll notice that 500 to 750 words is a lot longer than a lot of the passages on the old SAT were. Sometimes you would just see passages that were just a paragraph or two. Now they're all going to be longer passages. So on both tests, you're going to see passages that take up the majority, if not all, of a page, and then a set of questions that follow. So in terms of the content on the ACT, all the texts are pretty modern. You're not going to find anything that's from the 1700s or 1800s or includes texts that might be more difficult to understand. But on the SAT, you are going to see some of those texts. You're going to see what the SAT calls classical texts, including some texts from foundational or founding American documents like the Declaration of Independence and things that were not quite written so recently in the 20th or the 21st century. So if you're someone who struggles perhaps with language that's not completely modern, that might be a consideration for you. On the ACT, you're not going to find that, but you will find that on 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 of the SAT passages. Now, in terms of difficulty level, the ACT, all of the reading passages are about on the same level. Now you might find that one is a little bit more difficult for you just because you're just not as familiar with the science topic, for example, or you're not as comfortable with fiction. But they're all about on 10th grade, maybe 11th grade reading level. On the SAT, you're going to see some easier passages, so that's good if you don't feel as strong a reader, but you're also going to see some more challenging passages. They vary from a 9th grade reading level to early college, so reaching a little bit beyond what you may be even doing in school. So that's something to be aware of there as well. Now, as far as comparison passages go, sometimes students really hate these. I'm not quite sure why. I think they're okay, but you have to do this added level of comparing two different passages. So if that is a concern for you, you should know that, well, both of them have them. So on the ACT, you're going to see them you're going to see one comparison passage on almost every single test anymore. It's a new thing that the ACT has started in the past couple of years, but they won't say you necessarily are going to see one, but the SAT will. The SAT guarantees that you will see at least one comparison or dual passage on every single test. And here's something that's interesting about the new SAT that you may be aware of, appears on a lot of the sections, and that are informational graphics. So what does that mean? Well, on the ACT, it's all text. You're just reading. But on the SAT, on the reading section, you're going to see an occasional chart, data table, graphic that you have to integrate into your knowledge of the passage. So you might see a question that asks you how the graph supports something that the reading passage says, or something generally about how it relates to what you're reading. So you should know that as well too. Finally, time per question. All right, so here's how the section breaks down. You have less reading questions to do on the ACT. There's 40 questions. On the new SAT, there's 52 questions, and you also have to spend less time, agonizing through that reading section. Only 35 minutes compared to 65 minutes on the SAT, so that's a pretty significant difference. So what that breaks down is to about 52, 53 seconds per question on the ACT, and 1 minute and 15 seconds per question on the SAT. But remember, that's inclusive of the reading time, and on the SAT you have one more passage to read, so it works out to be about the same amount of time as far as the time you have to devote to reading and answering those questions on both tests as far as the reading section goes. That's not true on all the tests, so we're going to talk about that on the other sections and other videos coming up in Tuesday ACT, so make sure you check all of those out. And if you want to look at some practice questions for both the ACT or the new SAT, because we have that now too, you can go to magoosh.com and check it out.
Number of passages reading at SAT is 4. Number of fiction reading is 1. 7,900 words. Informational graphics. ACT has all text. That's a big thing too. The SAT has more tables and graphs and charts. Okay, it's all text on the ACT. So you're taking information out of charts and applying it forward to the answers. Okay, and here's the number breakdown as well to timing. I don't think a lot of students kind of really do that. The way the test is set up, the proctor is allowed to kind of announce 5 minutes and like 30 seconds. I believe they give the kids kind of time warnings in terms of how long they have, and so the kids kind of pace themselves off that. The ACT might be easier if you work fast or you don't have trouble running out of time on tests. The ACT in many ways is still a more straightforward test. You can finish on time. The ACT is more about what I think, the way I try to explain it is it's based off what you have learned. The SAT is more taking what you have learned and applying it forward, if that makes sense. It's more more intuitive than what the ACT is. So that's the thing. I wish I had the ACT when I was in high school. I do not infer well forward. I wish I had. Maybe I did have the ACT. I just didn't know about it. But I think the ACT is more like in the box, and the SAT is kind of like expand beyond the box. Again, the SAT is kind of the reverse. Like if you're not a fast reader, but you are a good reader, you're able to take readings. You're good at mental math, able to breeze through no calculator section with confidence while other students sweat. The non-calculator section is not all that long. I can't remember on the breakdown. Again, it's on chart. I can't remember what the non-calculator is. I think it's like 25 minutes for the non-calculator section. So there is that 25 minutes of your what have you learned and can you put it onto the paper compared to plugging it into a computer. Okay. Test optional movement. Okay, this is my favorite slide. 900 colleges, okay? There are more than 900 colleges in the United States. I don't know what the exact number is, but there is more. I'll use George Mason as an example of the local school. George Mason's test optional number is 3.5. If your GPA is about 3.5. They are saying is basically the work that you have done within the curriculum and your success within the school is enough for us to consider without having these tests, okay? And I think that's a tremendous vision, because if a student has shown that he or she is consistently good, does well, why should 3 hours muddy those waters? And that movement, I think, is very much a real thing. I think you'll see that kind of expand beyond. Again, you have minimum GPA, impact of this movement. The clearinghouse, that does not apply to the clearinghouse. Do we have any Division I, Division II athletes? Okay. What are you doing, Andrew? What are you going to do?
Going to Georgetown for marketing or economics and football.
Football? Good for you. Let me tell you a story about William Alvarez, a Hilton graduate, and Leo Gracilli. William Alvarez was touched by the gods. He was 6'3", 265. He looked like this. You looked at him and go, you play left tackle, don't you? Okay? Will didn't really take his studies as seriously as he should. Will was a good kid. Unfortunately, he struggled in the classroom. I broke my rule for Will. I had him testing like every month. Okay, all right, Will, we got the good math, we got the good English score, we got to get you through the math, okay? Because the higher your GPA, the lower your test scores need to be, basically. And if as your GPA drops, your test scores go like that. Well, Will was down here. Bud Foster was on my ringtone for a while. All you Virginia Tech fans, he knew my phone number, like how do you do? I was like, call you back, we're working on it. Okay? The last round of testing, Bud Foster calls me like, I got his scores, he's in. I'm just like, hot darn. Okay? Will went and played left tackle at Virginia Tech. And then there was Leo Gracilli. Leo Gracilli had 3.7 GPA, just rocked it out. When it came right down to it, we looked at the chart, what it needed to be eligible, he put his name in the paper. And he was eligible. He scored very well because I believe he's an engineer now. He played football at San Diego State. But the test experience for him was just so much easier because he knew that pressure, he was going to go to college on a football scholarship for free, and that test score really was going to inhibit him from doing it. Although if you're a standard student, yes, they have that movement, but the clearinghouse does require those test scores still. Okay, so depending if you're a Division I, Division II athlete. Did anyone attend the college athlete seminar? So if that's, I think that was Coach Smith, and he knows what he's doing. I think anything he said there was going to be pretty good. But again, so for college admission for regular, I think that's a movement moving forward. And I love it. I love it so. But it's not there yet, I think, and it'll going to continue to grow. PSAT, if you're a junior, National Merit Scholar, okay, that's scholarship money involved, okay. Whatever the average is, you got to score in the top 1% nationally, and that kind of determines what you rank within that. Okay, Khan Academy, there it is right there. That's a new thing that's kind of added with what the young lady was talking about with the Khan Academy. SAT does not currently have free test prep, but test questions available on the ACT site. Someone asked me, could you do the SAT prep and take the ACT test? Yeah, I don't see. I mean, the format of the test is different, but the content is not all that different. Where you take one, it's not an apples to oranges comparison. You could definitely take the two. But again, I firmly believe in the highly qualified teachers that Prince William County employs. Your students are getting a good education to where they'll be prepared for these tests. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if you addressed this. Is there a reason to take one or the other as far as our college? Some colleges only accepting the ACT, or is it always kind of optional?
I have not seen one rejecting the other one, honestly. So I think it's personal preference. It comes right down to it. I hate to overtest the kids, but if you feel more comfortable taking a science section, that's driving you toward the ACT. Will you probably take one of both? Yes. And if you feel like you need to take another one, you ask yourself, which one did I feel most comfortable taking? And you take that one again. But again, that involves money and time, and I'm not sure which one's more valuable these days, but probably the time, to be honest with you. But again, I grow wary of over-testing. And then.
Going to like a typical kind of school and your student is really good in science, is the school going to say, well, I want to see an ACT score over an SAT?
The school might say, I want to see an SAT 2 and take the science test. That's kind of the colleges are their own little country. They can dictate what they want. A college like UVA, again, is going to probably ask for an SAT 2 test and in a certain language. Maybe they might use it as a placement factor. They might use it as admission to a certain program. So that I think that unfortunately comes right down to the college and what they are dictating for their admissions process. Yes, ma'am.
Do they have, for children, I know for IEP students, they have some kind of, things that they do for them, but for a parent that does not have a child that is IEP, but has some kind of testing difficulty, some people are not good at testing, have distractions, some of them chewing gum or eating some nuts or tapping their fingers when the test taking. For people that cannot focus on their work when they have these kind of side distractions, is there any kind of quiet room or anything that they offer for these children?
You can apply for accommodations. They don't necessarily have to be sped. You can apply for those accommodations. Whether they grant them or not, I think is up to variable. I know at Woodbridge, being wary of those situations, they do try and take the testing environment down to as low as they can. Like at Woodbridge, we do about 20 kids, 18 kids per room to minimize those factors. By and large, will they get them? No. I mean, primarily you're going to get accommodations. If you're a student with special needs, you're going to have, it could get longer test time, you can get larger text, things read.
Specifically for people that have, like, for me, somebody's chewing next to me, it kills me.
The misophonia. Mrs. Lerman doesn't allow me to chew. I haven't had a piece of gum in 7 years of marriage. Believe me when I said that, I have not had a piece of gum in 7 years of marriage because she doesn't like the gum chewing. For that, probably not, honestly. They're not supposed to have those things in the testing room as it is, like coffee and drinks and stuff. They're not really supposed to have it in the first place. It's supposed to be pretty sterile. But in terms of can I go take this test room by myself? By and large, no. Yes.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Do you recommend kids take these SAT prep courses, like before they even, what do you think?
I speak for myself only. I am not in favor of for-profit education. I think you guys pay enough in taxes to Prince William County schools. I think you have highly qualified professionals in the classroom that follow a rigorous Virginia curriculum that prepares them for this stuff. I'm not saying it's like Huntington has had success, but I think if you are an average student can be successful based off the environment they are getting inside their school. To say your child's going to do that much better because you go spend X amount of money at Huntington, I can't say that. I have not. There's a population out there who do it. There's a population out there who do it, and I wouldn't assign a majority to it, no. But I call me a homer, but I'm a Prince William County fan. They don't pay me to say that, but I just feel like if you're taking a rigorous high school curriculum, you'll be prepared for these things that are coming before you. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
It was back on the subject of, as she's talking about distractions affecting you and your test taking, and you said at Woodbridge that you guys try to limit it to about 20 kids in the room. Do you know, are there specific schools that have kind of rules on how they do
The
that?
College Board sets the rules. The College Board says you're allowed to have X amount of students per proctor. When I gave it here, I tried to keep it to like 20, 25 kids. If the rules have changed from the time that I was in times administrator, that's a possibility. But I know we always do our best to keep it between 18 to 20 kids. Again, you're spreading out too. Just the sheer number of kids in a classroom. So, for example, like a student can say there are say test irregularities. Okay, where the student can say this bothered me, so therefore I was not allowed to take an optional test. So they might retest them, but I'm not sure what kind of environment they would put them in, post after. Students can cancel their scores up to 72 hours after they take the test if they feel they weren't in the best environment. But again, I don't know what the remedy is. Okay, you canceled your score, but how do I get a score? That's you kind of start chasing your tail a little bit.
I'm just more after, are there certain locations that might be better than others?
I would say no, because the College Board provides the standard set of here are the rules, stay within our box. The College Board sets its test environment. Is up to us to follow out the test environment. I would not say that if you can do like a 1 to 30 or 1 to 20, and we've opted to do 20, and Battlefield as an example is chosen to do 125 to do 1 to 25. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think most people are trying to create a test environment which you have optimal space. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So there's no free SAT or prep course at all that's given in Prince William County besides just what you get inside of the classroom?
Not that I'm aware of. Like again, the Khan Academy is fairly new, so I haven't really got a chance to explore this like through and through. So this is something you might want to like explore. But to my knowledge, there is always going to be like a nominal fee for materials.
I had it free back in the day. I went to Army School.
Yeah.
She had everything. I didn't take the test and the prep classes and the pre-test free.
Well, the pre-SAT is administered free.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm just saying outside.
What school did your daughter go to?
She goes to Forest Park.
Forest Park. So on Monday, go see Mr. Smith in the counseling office. He is the director over there, and maybe they might have a program that I'm not aware of, to be honest with you. But Mr. Smith, who is the director of counseling at Forest Park, would be an excellent resource for that. He would probably have information about that.
Check the sororities and fraternities and churches.
Yeah, there's I got like Woodbridge is doing a program. They just announced they're doing a program too. I'm not sure if it's for cost, but that's going through like the AP Scholars program. So I'm not quite sure how that's being run. So, okay. All right. You guys have been amazing. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.